Right. As I mentioned earlier, I'm going to send a link round to the film, which I hope you'll have a chance to look at afterwards. But just to run through the format of the session today, Glenn's going to be with us for the whole session, I hope. We're going to spend some time, he's going to explain the organisation workshop, the concept behind it, and just tell us the journey that he's been on to get to the point where he is now, which we're, fingers crossed, quietly confident about, I hope. We'll have a chance, as usual, to ask him a few questions, and then we'll move into breakout rooms to have a chance to speak in slightly smaller groups. And I have some sort of prompt questions up in the breakout rooms, but by now I'm sure that you're kind of getting a sense of the sort of questions you should be asking and how you should be interrogating the information that you hear. We'll come back to the main room and have a chance to feedback, and then probably have a bit of a break where we can get a cup of tea. And then after the break, Rachel is going to talk to us about her VeggieBot scheme, and I have her balanced scorecard, which we'll have a chance to interrogate, offer her some suggestions and comments and questions. Hugh, before I talk a little bit about the organisation workshop and then get Glenn to explain, is there anything that you'd like to add before we start?
Thanks, Vicky. No, I don't think so. I've heard bits about this project through Jess, really, but it's all new to me too. So in that sense, I look forward to hearing from Glenn, and we'll see what we can bring to bear in terms of our critical faculties collectively.
That's great. Thanks very much, Hugh. I've sent you the balanced scorecard, Hugh, so you should have that already, but it will be up on the screen shortly. So Glenn, just before we start, I thought I'd just give a very quick introduction. We're very excited and really pleased to have Glenn here because we've been lucky enough to do some work with Glenn on the organisation workshop last year. So to give you a quick overview, basically it's an idea taken from two Chilean psychologists who have taken the concept of the organisation workshop to many different countries throughout the world, most recently to Marsh Farm in Luton. And the idea is to concurrently set up a number of social enterprises which are all at the same time running businesses on one estate for the benefit of the whole estate. And it's really about helping people to grow their capacity and the entrepreneurial spirit, the business skills which are necessary to set up a social enterprise. And the facilitators offer tools and startup funding and a bit of technical expertise, but really it's up to the residents, the people who are participating in the workshop, to come up with the business idea, to analyse just what's needed to make it work, and to report back, you know, when they're organised. So I think, Glenn, if I go over to you and ask you to explain in a bit more detail, I have your balanced scorecard and a couple of the pictures you sent me, so I'll be scrolling through those. If I'm on the wrong quadrant, just tell me which one you want me to be on. So over to you, Glenn.
Thanks, Vicky. Good morning to everybody. This is my first time I've ever done this cyber meetings. So I'm looking at the wall, and I'm used to looking at somebody, so forgive me if I start talking nonsense, because I'm used to looking at a face. But anyway, good morning to everybody, and thank you for the opportunity to do this. I'm looking forward to sharing this and getting some critical feedback from everybody. Vicky just gave a good, succinct description, really, of what the organisation workshop is itself. It's actually a scheme which was developed in Brazil in the 50s. And it's classically it's been used to enable people who live in super deprived areas to generate on what we call entrepreneurial literacy and organisational literacy, because literacy is generally something that we look at as reading and writing, but there's other forms of literacy which are absent from communities all over the UK, I would say, but definitely in Marsh Farm and deprived communities like ours. Now, the organisation workshop is a completely different approach to what's used in the UK, because as we all know, efforts to create sustainable enterprises in deprived communities have, although there's been billions of pounds thrown at it, have been traditionally failure. There's been a failure. In fact, in our community, we've had 10 years of Marsh Farm New Deal funding, using New Deal for Communities funding, which is I'm sure everybody, most people would be aware, is a national scheme under the last Labour government, where we were given £50 million over 10 years to turn our community around. And in a place like Marsh Farm, you have as I say, there's a traditional failure to start up enterprise and capacity building schemes and stuff like that, particularly with deprived, most hard to reach, excluded residents of the estate, who generally don't go anywhere near traditional regeneration schemes. So our challenge was, it's all right making a physical job of doing up the estate. Anybody can do that, so to speak. You can make something look better physically, but the social and economic and spiritual fabric of the community is the much more challenging thing to deal with. And the organisation workshop is just one of the approaches we're using on Marsh Farm to do that. Now, if I could explain the organisation workshop itself is a process of learning by doing. So therefore, any qualifications, experience, normally things which are barriers to getting involved in a business startup, they're not barriers here because you learn them as you do them. And it's social scale, as Vicky described. It's not a small group enterprise startup, it's a large group, a community scale startup of enterprises. So concurrently 7 or 8, in our case 9, new social enterprises are kick-started all at once. And the energy of the large crowd in large part is used to harnessing that energy and sharing the skills and sharing the background and sharing the experience is something which mobilises a high degree of energy in the community, which just wouldn't be there with a group of 2 or 3 people. So it's social scale and it's learning by doing. There's expert mentors in all fields. There's in all 9 enterprise fields, there'll be someone on site for the first 8 intense weeks of this startup process. And by the way, the businesses are started up by giving them real contracts, and they have to deliver them, having organised themselves in whatever shape they do that. They have to deliver them and are paid for them as they deliver. So the incentive is not only to form your enterprise, but you get paid for the work you do, given that it's delivered properly, etc. So the learning experience is motivated by the ability to earn money and to generate revenue for this new enterprise you're forming. And there's expert mentors from all 9 of the areas of business we're starting. So there's an organic farm, so we'll have someone there who's run a farm for more than 10 years in a mentoring role. But the mentoring role is crucially like a driving instructor. Don't put your hands on the wheel, because the whole objective is that people have to organise themselves and learn to deliver whatever contracts or tasks they've been given by themselves. Because it's autonomous development we're talking here, rather than dependence on the mentor. The mentor is much more in the role of a driving instructor. So we have 7 funded enterprises. 9 will arise from it, but there's 7. I'll tell you what they are. There's a community farm, there's a building company, there's a sales and marketing outfit, as well as a bookkeeping and accounting. And those 2 enterprises, sales and bookkeeping, crucially support their sister enterprises, the builders, the farm, there's a music studio. They support their sister enterprises with those services, i.e. sales, bookkeeping, because these are things which traditionally and classically new startups fall down on within the first year. Don't do your tax returns, don't do your company's house stuff, so businesses fall over for that reason very frequently. So we've got sister enterprises that would do that. They're 2 of the 7. And then we have the farm, we have the builders, we have a cleaning company, we have a fast food and cafeteria shop, and all of these enterprises were discovered to be viable after we measured our own GDP in Marsh Farm. We went round Marsh Farm and asked everybody, where do we spend, how much money comes into your household every week, and where do you spend it? And we surveyed 20% of the estate to find out what we call our economic flows. Where does the money come into Marsh Farm, and then where is it spent? And although we're one of the most deprived, so-called deprived estates in the southeast, we actually found out that we have £54 million a year in private spend, as in people's wages, pensions, benefits, all of the things that the personal income we get. Totes up to about 54 million pound a year, so over £1 million a week coming in and being spent. And then we ask people, where do you spend that money? and people told us, you know, a whole list of shopping items ranging from fruit and veg through to petrol in the car. You know, the usual standard things that we buy on a weekly basis. And then we looked at how many of those spends could be captured, how much of that spend could be captured if we were to provide the same service that people currently, and we asked them where you get it from as well, and currently, because there isn't those services, there isn't a garage, there isn't a fast food shop, there isn't these things on Marsh Farm. If we were to set up a social enterprise on Marsh Farm, selling those products, how much of that spend would we have to capture to make a sustainable enterprise? And we found, I mean, one example, this is an unhealthy example, but we spend 1.6 million a year just on fast food takeaway alone. Now, that's, as I say, while that might not be healthy in terms of eating and health, it's healthy in terms of economy, but all of that is leaking out of the estate because we use 15 different places not based on Marsh Farm. £900,000 a year just on car MOTs and servicing, and yet we use 24 different garages, none of them based on Marsh Farm. So the story was that we gathered all that information together, we found out what were the big spends, if you like, where was the most money spent, what was the most viable for setting up an enterprise to capture that spend with the least amount of spend needed to set it up for the most outcome in terms of jobs created. So we looked at that kind of criteria, and we found there was 27 areas on Marsh Farm where you could set up a feasible social enterprise if you could capture perhaps 25 to 30% of that spend. So when we boiled it down to how much resources we've actually got a funding project for 839,000, and that allows us to pay for the tools, the setup, the mentors, the wages for the participants, for the people who are setting up the businesses for the first 8 weeks in most cases as a kickstart. And although they have to earn those wages aren't there, you know, just there, as with a lot of regeneration schemes, you get paid whether you deliver or not. In the OW, you must deliver to get paid because that's part of the learning incentive. And real world as well. It needs to be a real world environment. We're not trying to set people up to fail with some sort of plastic structure of support, which I think is one of the main criticisms I've got of Regeneration UK PLC, is that, you know, 3-year budgets, regardless of delivery, often has been my experience. So the OW is completely different, and those 7 enterprises we boiled down to were on the basis of the most viable with the least amount of setup money for the most amount of jobs. Now we reckon that, it's an estimate, we did a business plan for each of them, and we looked at the amount of revenue could be generated and how many jobs that could pay for, and we've come to, out of those 7 enterprises, we think 57 full-time jobs could be created. Now the likelihood is that those would be job shared, so there's a potential for 114 people who are currently unemployed to have the opportunity to set up those enterprises and create their own jobs. And out of those, once those 7 enterprises are up and running, let's say we manage to sustain those enterprises, because we strongly believe we will, because of the different process that the organisation workshop uses in order to kickstart these enterprises. It is a much more sustainable start than going and sitting in a classroom and listening to someone with a clipboard telling me about business startup and, you know, time management and all of that. So there's a much more real life experience, and we think that it's a much more people friendly, much more, particularly people who have no experience, friendly process to engage in. Now we've worked out, just in summary, we've worked out that those 7 enterprises, between them, we've got 3-year projections that if they all stand up, they could be generating about £200,000 to £300,000 surplus between them after 3 years, which would then be reinvested directly back into Marsh Farm. And what excites us about this process is that, as Vicky said, the organisation workshop isn't just about starting up a business, it's about creating a foundation for a saner economy in Marsh Farm. Because at the moment, as with the UK PLC everywhere, most business is done for private profit in a hierarchical shape, and the owner makes the benefit. These social enterprises would provide the basis for an economy on Marsh Farm which is about sharing and cooperation rather than hoarding and competition, because we think that that pervades not just our estate but the whole society and breeds an against each other mentality, which is not good for our estate or for the world. So these would be the foundation of a new economy in Marsh Farm, which is based on sharing of resources, sharing of any surpluses back into the estate through small business start-up grants, through bursaries for people to get education. We've got a scheme where we're going to install low energy technology into pensioners' homes on the estate in order to reduce their fuel poverty, and stuff like that. So the monies would be regenerated back into the estate. The system that we use to develop management skills within it, one of the beauties of the OW is that everybody learns cleaning and everybody learns management, because one demeans you and one elevates you. So everybody does those tasks within our team, and we use a self-managed framework for management, which basically rotates the management role around the whole team. There's 13 of us, and the OW encourages this model, a cooperative model, and flat management. We think flat management is essential because the psychology of dependency is all about the need to be managed. And I got taught at school, when I went to school, I got taught obedience to authority 10 times a day, maths 4 times a week, but obedience to authority pretty much 10 times a day. Stand in line, stand up, sit down, the bell goes, call me sir, don't be late, shine your shoes, etc, etc, etc. So we think flat management, Bob Marley said, emancipate yourselves from mental slavery, and we think that having been schooled in that way, in a waiting for the captain's whistle sort of mindset from school, particularly on deprived community estates like this, we have to organise ourselves in a shape which allows us to be self-managed, therefore much more confident, much more able, and much less dependent on either state benefits or hierarchical managers and top-down consultants and stuff like this. So that's the organisation workshop. Just in context, just one bit of framework for context for everybody. I was a founder member of Marsh Farm Community Development Trust, which is the delivery agency for our New Deal for Communities funding over 10 years. I resigned my position. I was vice chair of that when we founded it. I resigned it 3 years in because we became embroiled in a big battle to keep the original plan on track against a set of vested interests ranging from a couple of powerful councillors, some few noted builders in the area, and basically they would have preferred that we didn't have our original plan of a community centre, a hub in the middle of our estate, a massive 90,000 square foot factory we have in the middle of the estate, and they would rather have built houses on that, private houses, even though we'd won our New Deal for Communities funding on a promise that to the residents that we would regenerate this building, rebuild it and make it a community hub. Well, the good news is we won that battle. It took us several years to win that battle. But I'm just able to look out my window now, and if I went upstairs and looked outside, I could see the roof of our brand new 67,000 square foot neighbourhood hub. It's got an indoor children's play park. It's got essentially, because you need to bring people to Marsh Farm for reasons other than just to use a computer suite, because there's computer suites all over Luton. But an indoor children's play park, 7,000 square foot, high energy, will draw people from Bedfordshire, never mind just Luton, because there's not one in Luton like that. So that would generate what they call our footfall. We call it people, they call it footfall. That would generate footfall into the area and enable all the other uses, our shopping centre, etc., to benefit from that. So Marsh Farm Community Development Trust, our last year, we closed down this year, Marsh Farm Development Trust. I'm now a director of Marsh Farm Futures, which is the legacy organisation which is going to manage this building on behalf of the community. The building's owned by the community, and it was called the jewel in our crown when we started our New Deal journey in the delivery plan, and I'm really chuffed to say that they're just putting the finishing touches and we get the keys on December the 6th. That's the basket where all these enterprises will be based, and the eggs, if you like, are the social enterprises and the private enterprises and a business innovation centre, all of the things that we're going to need to regenerate our economy in Marsh Farm. And that sits in the middle of our estate and is due for to be opened on January the 3rd. The organisation workshop project is due to begin on January the 3rd as well. So it should be a community development extravaganza, and all the fruits of our years of struggling on Marsh Farm are due to be reaped, God willing. So that's background. How's that, Vicky?
That's fantastic. Thanks very much, Glenn. I mean, Glenn's been working on this project for many years, so to be able to condense it down to 15 minutes and to give us such a good explanation is brilliant. So I know I've got a few questions. If people could put their hands up, if they've got any particular questions, we'll move to breakout rooms in about sort of 10 or 15 minutes or so. So hands up, everyone, if you have questions. Over to you, Sarah.
A very inspiring talk, thank you. It's a bit of a random question, but are you linked with Just Change over in India by any chance? Just because I used to work over there, and I'm just thinking, is it really a small world and you're sort of connected up with them? Because I've sort of heard about this project before, and I'm just wondering if it's the same kind of thing, because I was working there last year.
Yeah, morning, Sarah. Yeah, we're the UK distributors for Just Change tea. I mean, very briefly, if I could just let everybody know, Just Change is a producer to consumer, knock out the middleman arrangement. What we say, make a living, not a killing arrangement, whereby we import tons of ethically traded tea. And I mean, when I say Essex, I mean, for a lot of people on our estate, Essex was a place outside London before we got involved in self-help. But Essex in tea, I know there is a fair trade movement in existence and all that, but this is direct from us, deprived residents, deprived community in Marsh Farm, directly connecting with our brothers and sisters in Gudalore in India. There's a picture up on the thing there of the Adivasi band. You can see on that whiteboard thing Vicky's put up. There's Chatty in the purple coat in there. The three guys there. Those three are Adivasi, which means Aboriginal people from India, and they, like us, have a background of squatting. I'm a member of a collective formerly called the Exodus Collective, now called Leviticus. It's music and sound and squatting and all that. That's my background. And these guys have got the same background. They squatted some land which used to be owned by British tea companies, which was laid to waste, and they grew their own tea, and after a while managed to buy that land, and we now buy tea directly from them and distribute it around Marsh Farm, and the OW will be giving that a major kickstart. The tea essentially has to be priced the same as Tetley's is in our local supermarket, because as with all the things we're doing here, our farming, our tea our tea sales, they have to be at the same. You have to be able to sell an organic onion at the same price as Tesco would sell a non-organic onion, and as with the tea. So yes, Sarah, we're honoured to be family members with those guys.
Yeah, hi Glenn, great talk, really inspiring, and well done for winning the battle against the local councillors. I was going to just ask really, how did you win the battle against the local councillors and builders?
Well, good morning. There's only one way, in my experience, that battles can be won against powerful vested interests who use the framework called democracy to basically pursue their own agenda. I mean, committees, classically, committees down here, we've got people down here who are architects at how to engineer a committee, particularly using the mushroom strategy, where most of the directors on the board, on a resident board anyway, the mushroom strategy is keep them in the dark and feed them shit. That's what we call the mushrooms. And if you've got a player or two on a local board of residents or on the council who knows the structures and everybody else is a bit of a newbie, then that's a very easy situation to manipulate and make it look like you've got the mandate of the council or the board or the directors or whatever. So what we had to do in the face of that, the only way that it can be fought, is mobilise the residents their efforts to prevent information being disseminated, we would meet that with our own dissemination of information, which was, you know, across the estate. And that means going and not just dropping it through doors, going knocking doors, speaking to people on the doorstep, you know, speaking to our neighbours basically. And you find that people are like, wow, you know, someone's actually taken the time to come and talk to me rather than drop a glossy mag through the door. And through crossing that bridge of glossy Magsville through to direct face-to-face contact with our neighbours, and when they put propaganda in the paper, we have a paper here called Luton on Sunday, which is a rag and a propaganda rag, and it's connected to these councillors. So they're very powerful, they're very powerful reach across the town. So when they put Luton on Sunday out on Marsh Farm, we copied their banner, reproduced the same sort of, made a PDF of their front page, and then just used modern technology to remove it, put our own story in there, and we call it the Marsh Farm on Monday. So it's kind of a response that we can have, and it, you know, they had to put it in their own paper and say, oh, what a cheek, you know, but it's a great way of responding. And also we mobilised 1,000 petition in just 3 days. We got 1,000 names on a petition, went on the local BBC radio, said, look, there's strong opposition to this housing plan. They're claiming it's a fait accompli because they've engineered it on the committee, but the residents ourselves, who are claimed to be over-consulted, haven't even had a say. So we mobilised 1,000 names in 3 days, demanding a referendum. And they were forced then to hold a referendum with the Electoral Reform Society. We went round the estate with loudspeakers, a lorry, and vote option 1, and you know, the option 1 was the original plan. And happily, residents voted 600 people voted, 600 households voted, which is more than the council get, and 64% of them voted keep option 1.
Thanks, Glenn. I've got a question about the grants and bursaries that you mentioned, which are to come out of the profits from the enterprises themselves. Can you just talk us through how this works? Do the enterprises sort of tithe over a portion of their surplus in order to feed back into these grants and bursaries?
Yeah, Vicky, it's the way it works is that the 7 companies which we're going to set up are individual small community interest companies, but they're affiliated to a mothership, if you like. The OW process, during the OW process, they're all born as one enterprise doing 7 different things. So they'll be under one, when they start their organisational development process, we all start off as one big company. And then we break down as the process goes on, and you get broken down by, you give them contracts as one big company to begin with. So you all do collective accounting, open accounting, everybody learns that. And then as the process goes on, it's an 8-week intensive learning process, the OW. In about week 3 or 4, the contracts are then given to smaller organisations. So the catering arm becomes a catering company, and all of the support's provided for them to do that. But they're still affiliated to the mothership. Now the mothership, we've got a governance system set up whereby Marsh Farm Futures, the overall umbrella, of which I'm a director for as it says, Marsh Farm Future for the Future, who would own and manage the building on behalf of the residents, funds from the mothership company, which is the 7 enterprises combined, any funds once we've spent on reinvestment into the company, all of that sort of thing, growth strategies, all of that, any surpluses are then transferred to, in a service level agreement, to Marsh Farm Futures. Now Marsh Farm Futures can only distribute that money on certain things, because what we didn't want is people working in social enterprises on maybe a Marsh Farm average wage, just above £17,000–18,000 a year, having surpluses from their energy put into paying suits on £45,000 a year, who in our experience don't do too much other than sit around a lot of the time. So that was a no-no. We definitely didn't want that. And so we had to define in this service level agreement what the surpluses would happily be used for. And that was defined as such things as, you know, things which are good for people at the grassroots level. Bursaries, education bursaries. When New Deal runs out, money runs out, which is April 2011, there won't be any education bursaries anymore on Marsh Farm, and that's been really good for people here. small start-up grants for new business. That's been really good for people, but that won't be here. But happily, you know, the whole idea of New Deal was that we arrive at a position where we don't need government funding for that kind of thing anymore, because we can generate that by selling chips and growing vegetables and fixing cars, and put all that surplus back into that. So we defined, Vicky, within the service level agreement what it can be used for. And specifically, one of the things I was really happy with is, as I say, this fuel poverty tackling measure, whereby we've looked into a classic Marsh farmhouse. How could you change it into a energy efficient, so insulate it and then get some technology in which, you know, solar, wind, combined heat, all of that. And some of the money would go to that, because although we hope to set up a social enterprise installing that kind of equipment, there's a group of people on this day, old people, you know, stuff like that, who can't afford that. So we would use some of the surpluses from these enterprises to install that into you know, people who are a little bit more disadvantaged and can't afford it. We put that kind of technology in their house. So the uses are defined through a service level agreement and a governance arrangement. A diagram, I could send you the diagram actually, and I could circulate all this information about the OW to everybody, or put it on our website and people can see it.
That's great, thanks Glenn. If you send it to me, I'll circulate it out to everyone, along with the link to your film. That would be fantastic. Hugh, over to you.
Hi Glenn. Fantastic. I love all this stuff. I need to declare a bit of an interest. I've been working with Jess and Vicky on reviewing with CLG the exit strategies for all the NDCs, and it's a pretty sorry picture around the country, as you say, of what was supposed to be a genuine experiment in terms of resident-led regeneration being suborned by powerful players across the country. Some areas have done better than others, and to some extent I've followed the Marsh Farm story over the years. You know, I love the analysis of the local spend and looking how you can develop things that will recirculate that money locally, and the figures I think are fascinating. I think your community is 8,000 people, so no real surprises in the private spend GDP. I've always used roughly as a rule of thumb 100 million per 10,000 people. In the source of that money in poorer communities tends to be largely public sector. So if we know anyway that 40% of the economy, 45% of the economy is in the public sector hands, that figure we know goes up much higher in poorer communities. And then you have usually a very small private sector, so no local services, and then often a reasonably substantial grey economy out of which often the creativity comes. Resonance for me in terms of setting up a number of enterprises with sort of mutual support mechanisms into some of the Grameen Bank thinking around women's lending circles particularly, and they were created, I suppose, within those cultures to overcome the additional barriers that women often face in terms of taking enterprise initiative within a very patriarchal societies. The other thing that rang a bell with me is the central provision of sales and marketing and bookkeeping and accounting as key skills that are often lacking from individual startup enterprises. You know, somebody may be good at growing vegetables but lousy at selling them and doing their own books and working out what they're doing. So interesting resonance for me from other models. I think there's a guy called Ciroli who is a sort of Californian-based enterprise development person. And I guess the other thing that we've seen quite a lot of, although that is much more sort of, I think, higher level service industry, very IT based, is this whole notion of catalyst centers or business hubs where you just create an environment where lots of individuals get together and use their laptops and generate business out of that. So a bit of a ramble for me. Let me get to my specific questions. I didn't quite get, maybe I wasn't quick enough in writing them down, the businesses that are going to come out of this. I'm also interested in how many and how the recruitment process for the OW has gone. How did you choose people, and how much sort of pre-preparation have you done before the formal workshop starts? And finally, I'd like to understand a little bit more about how you're going to use the 837K. So how much goes into capital costs for startup of the building? How much is basically working capital, I suppose, and how much goes to pay the mentors and the organisers? Can you deal with those three, Glenn? I'll happily take them one at a time if you like. So the first one was just to be absolutely clear about the 7 businesses.
Okay, thanks for that, Hugh. That was I'll just echo everything you've just been saying about your experience in the game, what we call the game, Regeneration UK PLC, and the vested interest and you're right, there are some areas we've done better than others, but I think that the key to all this is how do you generate that sustainable local, we'd call ourselves an anchor organisation. How do you anchor wealth within deprived communities? I don't think there's any other solution to it. I think it's as simple as that. This is a general comment on what you said at first, and I will, if it's all right with you, take your questions one at a time, because there's one about recruitment, which is really, I'd be really interested to share that. There's one about the 7 enterprises and one about the spend breakdown. The spend breakdown, I will send to Vicky a complete breakdown, and completely. I can't give you off the top of my head the exact precise, but I could give you roughs. But I think it'd be better if I send you the breakdown, and I can put that, Vicky can share that with you. So if I start off with the 7 businesses, there's, as you say, the 2 back support essential businesses of sales and marketing and bookkeeping and HR, human resource management, if you like. We've combined those 2, so they provide that support to their sisters. Then there's a cafeteria and a fast food shop. There's a building company. There's a cleaning enterprise, home and office cleaning. There's the organic farm, which is what we call an urban village farm. It's we've got 15 acres available to us to kickstart an urban village farm. Again, some of our spend on onions and cabbages and stuff like that can be captured. There's a social and community association, which is basically an organisation that would run social provision from 3 different places on Marsh Farm. We've got a place within our new community centre. We've got our own base at Marsh House. So it wouldn't be something with a static base with all the overheads that go with that, but it's got all the equipment to turn any one of those bases into everything from an Irish wedding through to a Muslim wedding. The place needs to be completely different. So we've got a bare place. So the social, is that 7 I've said there? And then there's two more enterprises which emerge from the activity that generates from those 7 funded startups. One is the Just Change tea enterprise, which we've already got purring at like idling at the traffic lights, ready to have our foot put on the accelerator. And the whole OW process, the energy of it will help that. Everyone will become a tea seller, if you like. And a music studio, which is it's based on an ancient site. Our current base, if you ever look at the pictures, Vicky's got Marsh House. Our current site is an really old farmhouse based on an ancient site. So we mix music and history and call it ancient rhythms. So there's 9 there's 7 funded ones, and 9 which those 2 we already have the infrastructure and stock for, the T and the studio, so they get kick-started through it.
Well, Glenn, that's great. Would you say something about the recruitment?
Yeah, this is really interesting. I'm interested in this. When we started Marsh Farm Outreach, when we developed our own cooperative, we used a really innovative, different method of recruitment. What we did is we notified the whole estate with a door knock, a leaflet, the amount of money we had to start off, and we said to everybody on the estate, look, this is the role. It's community outreach. Not in the classic sense where you've actually, gone to Regen College and got yourself a certificate or whatever, but outreach in the true sense of the word. We're going to try and reach as deeply into our community, particularly the hard-to-reach sections, as we can. And the best way we can see that is local people with local knowledge, and we can upskill ourselves, as we go along with in the OW approach with development training attached to the learning. We advertised across the whole estate. We had 40 people showing interest, and when we originally started we had 6 positions. We had funding for 6 positions through the New Deal, and we had 40 people apply. Well, rather than the usual process, which is to say do a paper exercise first, essential criteria, desirable criteria, I've done the standard interviews as in my role as director of the trust here, and that's all done in private. There's a panel sets up and you score each applicant, and at the paper stage you throw out loads of people at that stage and get down to the ones you want to interview, and then put those through a process where essential and desirable criteria are scored, and then you end up with whoever won the scoring at the end of it. And what we wanted to do is be a lot more open and a lot more inclusive than that. So we advertised it across, and everybody who applied was invited, and this will be modelled for the OW. This is what we're about to do for the OW. Everybody is invited to turn up at what we call a self-selection process, and that essential and desirable criteria is openly adopted by all of the participants. So essential criteria is you've got to be on the dole for more than 6 months, or unemployed out of economic activity for 6 months, and live on Marsh Farm. They're the only 2 essential criteria. Desirable criteria, because it's done openly and by the people for the people, you can actually adopt a process where you say, look, we want this many skilled people, this many over 50s, this many from the NEET group, and then break that down out of the perhaps 114 job opportunities there might be. We might have 65 from the NEET group, and they score themselves. And the scoring is done on a criteria which again is adopted by all of the participants, so it's completely open. You know why you got your score, you know what your score is, and it's done differently in as much as that normally if you're long-term unemployed you get 0 points for experience, whereas in this process you would get higher points for exclusion. So you'd have more chance of getting a job if you've been longer term unemployed than you would if you were experienced. Matching that, of course, and balancing that with use of engagement of some of the people on the estate here who are excluded long term but are actually highly skilled. One of the enterprises we intend to set up in wave 2, because we're having this is intended to be wave 1 of a 3-wave OW, would be a car garage. We've got people who haven't worked formally for 25 years on Marsh Farm, but they're brilliant mechanics, and their skills either end up in the grey economy or go to waste. So use of that skilled labour mixed with the NEETs, the kids who need the experience, and then we all go through a scoring process. And those scores are transparent. They're on a big screen in a big hall with maybe 200 people there. And the ones who come out at the top end, I mean, if people wanted to do full-time work, there's 57 posts. If we wanted to job share, there's 114. And those people will be openly and visibly scored. So you'll have a scenario where people walk around saying, I've got 86 points, well, I've got 79, and that sort of thing. And when we did this with outreach, we found that they job shared the 6 posts, it went to 12 posts, and because the outreach was greater. And we had 15 people retained as volunteers. We had more volunteers than we had people who actually got the paid jobs, and I anticipate that will happen in this process as well. So it's very unusual, it's very energetic, it's very transparent. No one could come at the end of it and say, oh, you picked him because you liked him or whatever. I didn't pick, we all picked, you know. And you end up with a set number. Then you set some reserves from the people who are volunteers as well. So we mobilise a volunteer army off the back of it. You have a reserve process because you have to allow for some dropout. And then all of the support which every individual needs at that recruitment process, whether it be language, whether it be disabilities, whether it be benefit advice. You know, we're trying to set up an arrangement where the benefits people can be a flexible safety net rather than an intractable, make your wake 8 weeks for your money safety net. And, you know, so all of that will be done through the recruitment process. That starts next week, given that we get the go-ahead from the government on, or from Marsh Fund Development Trust now next Monday. And it'll be it's all being filmed. It'll be a really exciting process, and it's something that I'm absolutely convinced is going to be, that in itself is going to be an experience worth living through.
That's fantastic. I know Vicky wants to move us on, but can I just ask one more question? The initial market, particularly for, obviously I understand the organic farm will to some extent create its own market, but for building and cleaning work, have you sourced the initial markets for those, or is that part of the process?
We've opened initial contacts with, I mean, what we did with the cleaning, we looked, and you'd be amazed actually how many working single people there are on places like Marsh Farm who leave here, get on the train, come back home 8 o'clock at night. There's a fair percentage of young men, particularly on the estate, who are really keen to use cleaners if they don't already. So there was a surprising amount of people locally who would use a cleaning service. We went to a few local rich areas nearby and knocked a few doors there and done some market research there and said, look, this is a social enterprise, would you support it? And we got a fair amount of support from surrounding villages. But the main market for the cleaning enterprise is our big building here, the community centre. The council are talking to us about breaking off pieces of the overall cleaning contract that they tender out to allow us to do little bits and grow our capacity, so that in 4 years' time that cleaning company may be able to look at the council contracts, which currently go out to highly exploitative private contractors. So that would be, I would love it if we could capture some of that in the future. So you've got a small term, an immediate market here, as in the local and the village and the social enterprise based in Luton, Voluntary Action Luton, they pay cleaners. And you know, our pitch is, even if you're not a social enterprise, you know, if you're getting more out of your spend, you're not just getting your office clean, but you're helping deprived communities as well, then it's a good marketing pitch as well. So there's an initial market with a growth strategy in the business plan of looking towards the council. And Luton Borough Council have been really supportive of this process, apart from that dodgy councillor. You know, in the end, the rest of the good councillors kind of marginalised him a bit and gave their full support to this process, I'm happy to say. Thank God for our mayor and the leader. And they are looking at breaking off, not just on cleaning, but on construction as well, on the other areas, small pieces of the existing contracts to build our capacity.
Do you know, just to jump in, I think I'm not going to move people to breakout rooms because we seem to be having a good discussion here. So let's just, let's all keep in a slightly smaller group, but just for the next 10 or 15 minutes or so we'll ask questions. Sandy, you're next, but can everyone put their hand up now? I'm sure everyone who's not asked a question already, and we'll all have an opportunity to ask Glenn to respond. So over to you, Sandy.
Hi, Glenn. I think I've missed this, but where's the £800,000 coming from?
From the grey economy, Sandy. No, not really. we got a New Deal for Communities fund over 10 years, which we got in 2000, and we're in year 10 of that now. And one of the last spends of that is £839,000 to set up these enterprises. So it was a 48.6 million fund over 10 years, with which we bought our building, our play park. We've done all new lights on the estate. There's a lot of physical infrastructure work, and this is about what I'd call the social, economic, spiritual fabric, the jobs for the excluded. This is so it's from that fund.
I've got a question about the marketing and sales and accounting and HR enterprises, and I wondered if those were sort of nudged into the OU because from previous experience it's been seen that those are the areas that new organisations, new enterprises often struggle with, so it was understood that those are useful to have, or whether they arose quite organically. And if whether they were nudged in or otherwise, how much of their turnover, how much of the work they're doing do you envisage being for the OU rather than for separate, different private contracts?
They were not nudged in. They were openly touted as being essential because of, as you say, because we'd identified and experienced with a lot of experience of new startups, especially through New Deal, people trying to start up new businesses, and the amount of them that fall over because they simply don't. Hugh said it himself: great vegetable growers, but crap at marketing, or keeping your books, or making your company house returns, or whatever. So they were a conscious decision to make those an essential part of the overall family of social enterprises. Those enterprises, there's a synergy relationship between each of these enterprises, a mutual benefit. So the builders would use the cafe, the cleaners would clean the others' offices and that sort of thing. So there's an economic relationship. But these enterprises, the sales and marketing and bookkeeping, I think is about 40% of their projected income would come from enterprises in Marsh Farm, from their sister enterprises. But their long-term survival, and we've funded those, we've funded wage payments for those for 6 months, so that they're there regardless for the first 6 months in order to be able to keep providing those services. And from that stage on, they need to gather a lot more of their revenue from outside of Marsh Farm, as in bookkeeping or sales services for other social enterprises throughout Luton, for private companies. We've got a couple of arrangements with a couple of accountants who will give us work which they do, but they haven't got time to finish off, so they kind of pass that over, and so there's a fair few social enterprises in Luton who we've spoke to who would be only too happy to transfer their sort of bookkeeping contracts to another social enterprise doing the same, because there just isn't one in Luton, Vicky. So I think it's about 40-60. I think 40 from home and 60 from the outside market.
Hi Glenn, I'm Marie. I work for the NDC in Southampton, so I'm very interested about your project, and I would say well done, and well done for winning the battle with that councillor. I've got one question about the composition of the board of your trust. Are the board members the same as the board members from the NDC program, or are they any different?
Hello Marie. When we started in 2000, the composition of the board was 16 residents, elected residents, and 8 service provider partners. So you'd have the police, the standard, PCT, health people, council, local university, chamber of commerce, across the board, education, person from the council. So we had 8 different partners. As I've already said to you, I've found that system manipulation is the name of the game. We call it, we've got a name for it down here, we call it participulation, which is a mixture of participation and manipulation. Participulation. And these guys are experts at coming in and making hay with any seasoned boards, never mind boards of residents who have not got the capacity or experience to be able to deal with that. And the mushroom strategy of overload with information, like you get all these reams of minutes and meetings and all of that sort of 3 days before the board starts, or even 7 sometimes, but if they do well, but people just don't read them, you know, so you end up with an ill-informed mass and a few players. So as time's gone on, we've looked at a completely different model for resident participation, and what was missing, and when we touted for this along the way, we were told you can't split the board, you can't have a separate residents group of directors and, you know, 8 service providers, we're all one group, and that was always the councillor's insistence that you can't split the board. But you have to split the board. The resident members need to be delegated from a resident forum who have done our dirty washing, discussed every item on the agenda, and having had that discussion, an informed discussion amongst an open residents forum, then our board members should be delegated from that to sit on partnership bodies and speak on our behalf. But what happens in practice is you have 16 or 60, it doesn't matter how big the majority is, if the majority is ill-informed and unable to make a decision, and have disputes between resident members at the board meeting. It makes no difference because it all goes to nothing anyway. So what we need is an informed, delegated team who sit on partnership boards and express our point of view. Because when you think about it, every other partner on the board, from the police to the council, they do that. They go back into their separate organisations, do their dirty washing, work out their strategies, and then delegate the person to the board. When we tried to do that as a separate forum, we were told we were splitters, and I think that speaks volumes.
Thank you.
Hi, Glenn. It's Jess. Yeah, thanks very much. It's been really interesting listening to your experiences, and really interesting in some of the innovative approaches, like you're saying about the recruitment. It sounds like fun. I get a couple of questions really. One was a bit about the self-sustaining and you're building a resilient business. We saw the scorecard, and perhaps just to understand what if you could say something about the actual progress that some of the well-established enterprises are making in terms of becoming self-sustaining, if that's the goal. I assume that's the goal. And then maybe I'm also interested in your wave 2 and wave 3, just to get an idea of the things which you're already planning for other enterprises.
Morning, Jez. Just to be clear, mate, right? There's our social enterprise, our own work. We're a workers' cooperative, and we've been in existence for 9 years. As I say, we were folded halfway through the process because of this councillor business and all of that, and we re-established ourselves. But throughout our 9 years, we've got 9 years trading accounts. We've got a self-managed cooperative structure. We do occasional paid work, but our main battle has been voluntary and fighting for the OW on Marsh Farm and the building and the play park and all of that. So there's a distinction between our own social enterprise and the enterprises I've been talking about, which will be kick-started during the organisation workshop process. Now they haven't happened yet. We've done all the background research, we've done customer capture, we've done consultation with residents, we've done numbers, market research, the business plans. We've got all of that in place, but the whole idea of the OW process is that that's all not thrown into the bin, but used as a foundation for the people to develop their own participative business planning process. That would start in 3 weeks' time. And on January the 3rd, having gone through their business planning process, so they adopt the business plan we did, shape it, amend it, update it, and own it, adopt it, and then go into the challenging task of, after that recruitment process, of kick-starting these new businesses. So your question about how are they doing is a bit early. They haven't started yet, they're about to start. Our own enterprise, which could be used as a model for how those others may do, I mean, we're a very committed group of people, and that's one of the things that the OW process should be able to engender within the wider community, that commitment to the cause. is the main thing. But our endurance throughout 9 years of, I mean, when you actually read some of our history, some of the attacks we've been subjected to along the way in order to sink this little ship that we've put together is legendary. And to be honest with you, I'm honoured to be part of a group of people who can endure for as long as we have. So it bodes well for the other social enterprise models if this flat managed workers co-op not-for-profit model can be so enduring over the years that we've been in existence, and file our accounts and do all the things without any support that we've had to learn to do. Then I think it, you know, although I can't answer your question about how long they last now, I think it bodes well for the future.
Hear, hear. Fantastic work. Jez, you've still got your hand up. I'm not sure if that means you've still got a question to ask. Thank you. Over to you, Hugh.
Thanks, Vicky. Jez, sorry, Glenn, I just wanted to really try and link your description of the OW to some of the thinking we've been doing on this community sector trading course. I guess what we've been trying to help people think through by linking it to real life trading examples is three things really: strategic planning, investment readiness, and how to pitch a business idea. And I was particularly intrigued by the selection, I suppose, that you made of the relevant businesses to establish within the within Marsh Farm, within the community, and how it seemed to me that you'd chosen ones that essentially had what I've been describing in this course as a low cost of entry. Broadly speaking, the capital costs are relatively low. And I guess the other thing that one would say about them is that they're mostly relatively, at least at the beginning, low skill areas. This, it seems to me, you know, clearly is a relevant strategy for a poor community. I'm just interested, I suppose, in two things. One is you sort of mentioned as a throwaway line that you've got 15 acres to work with, and you've clearly got the new Community Anchor organisation. So although in a way they seem like low capital startup, there is an infrastructure provision both of land and buildings that are sort of given, if you like, to this. And I wondered if you'd like to comment a bit about that. The other thing that we've been encouraging people to do, I love the learning by doing. I'm a passionate believer in learning by doing, and I hate the classroom-based approach to business skills and all that stuff. We've been encouraging people very much to learn by visiting other people who are already doing these things, and I wondered whether within the OW structure there was much place for what we've been calling benchmarking. So, as usual, rambling around the questions, but just to recapitulate, could you say something about startup capital? I guess it's a little bit going back to my question about how you're using the 800 grand, but it does seem to me that not everyone has 15 acres available to them. You know, that basic capital infrastructure seems to me to be quite important to the model. And then the question about benchmarking and visiting outside the estate to learn from people who are already doing this.
Yeah, nice one. On the benchmarking first, built into when we designed the OW, this 8-week experience, for example, we go and visit everything from the Rochdale Co-op Museum as part of the what we call conscientisation, the learning, the history of co-ops, all of that sort of thing, the learning. And we also have looking at similar enterprises doing similar things for trips out, if you like, because a big part of it is it's a big social experience as well, the OW, as well as a, you know, when you design it, you build in social nights, so the social community association enterprise are contracted to provide trips out, nights out, that sort of thing, try and regenerate some of the social energy that's missing in Marsh Farm. So that would be like a Butlins type atmosphere where your kids can come at night and all of that, as well as trips out, not only social ones, but you know, working ones to other sites. So there's a lot of, I'd call that learning by inspiration as much as learning by doing, benchmarking you call it. So yeah, a lot of that, Hugh, is built into the process. As far as the infrastructure, yes, Sarah, anytime. Can we come and visit? Anytime, Sarah. As far as the capital setup goes, you're right in your analysis of what we're doing, and I think it's something like on the research you're doing, Hugh, is absolutely low capital startup was a big factor in terms of what's the ratio of how much you put into what you get out. And when you've got a limited budget and 27 enterprise ideas, you want to be, what are available to you, you want to be going for the best value for money return, obviously. And I have to say that, as I said, we've picked 7 which are big spenders. So there's a big, fast food's a massive market. We're looking at bringing the garage back into wave 1. Yeah, because the building company one, because our building's finished now, because we were so delayed. Some of its work was geared to the construction of our building here, our community centre, and that's going to be finished by the time the OW starts. So we're going to shift some of the resource setup funding from the builders company and maybe go back into our garage and bring that in wave 1. Now these things can be set up relatively cheaply in relation to the amount of money they can generate and the amount of jobs they can generate. And yes, there is an aspect as well of, because it's the first wave OW, that the not too complex on the skills base and already existing within the hard to reach population of Marsh Farm, there already exists mechanics, builders, cleaners, you know, there's already a skill base to some degree in those fields. So unashamedly we've gone for the easier options, the cheaper options, the higher return options and the safest options in order to get us started, because here's the point here in terms of a sustainable community, and we're well aware of this. We have one step to go. We've got our base, we've got our project, we'll have our funding, God willing, on Monday, and we'll be ready to kickstart this OW. If we can make those 7 enterprises stand up, if they stand up and we've got active marketing support for them, not just from the sales and marketing, but from us, the outreach team, we'll be committing all amounts of sweat equity to make sure that they stand up, help them do all they can to stand up in terms of customer capture, organisational support, all of it. And if they do stand up, God willing, they do stand up, then we have a model where we've got 100% startup success rate. Well, at the moment in Marsh Farm, it's an 80% failure rate startup. If you can achieve that, if we can achieve that, then we don't need any more public funding, because we bank with Triodos and they have millions of pounds to invest in safe, ethical enterprises. So we've reached a point at which we are self-sustainable as a community, not just in terms of generating our own small grant money, but in terms of being able to have an economic base on which is safe enough for us to go to Triodos and say, we want to make our 15-acre farm into a 1,500-acre farm, and they would support it. So we're one bridge away.
Great, thanks. Sorry to jump in, Susan. So in the language we've been talking in terms of CST, it seems to me that the grant provides the hard part, which is the initial risk capital, and once you've got that started, then I think you're right. Once you have a trading business, access to further finance is easier, for sure. the higher skills, it seemed to me, were in the sales and marketing and bookkeeping. Did you find those skills on the estate? I guess one final comment from me, are you doing social return on investment calculations? If you get 67 people into jobs and you get them off the dole, that represents a saving to the government, which actually justifies the risk capital in the first place.
Yes, Hugh, we did a projected social return on investment. We actually did that through NEF. We got a template from NEF and did it ourselves. We did we worked out, and it was it's a clever piece of kit actually, because it speaks money to people who only understand money, and it makes a pound for pound calculation about how much, if you stop someone being a car thief, how much does that save to the exchequer. So I've got a document, I've got a social return on investment which calculates all that, and I'll give that to Vicky to circulate that to you and the other members of this group. What was your other question, Hugh? One was SRO.
About whether the bookkeeping skills were taken from the estate as well, I think.
That's right, yeah. The bookkeeping skills, yeah. We've actually, there's quite a few bookkeepers on Marsh Farm. There's quite a few accountants on Marsh Farm, funny enough. But we are also joined to adjoined to another place called Barton Hills, and that's full of accountants. There's big houses down there. That's where a couple of them have come through and said to us, look, if you set this up, not only can we help, but we might be able to overspill some of our work to you, because they just really support what we're trying to do here. You know, some of the negative press we had over the time has actually drawn in. Like one big company of accountants came to us last week because they've been front paging us for a few weeks down here, and came in and said, like, you know, is there anything we can do to help? So although there are bookkeeping skills on Marsh Farm, in most cases they're employed already. Those people are working, and so, you know, they can be there in terms of brotherly, sisterly mentoring help, but the more complex skills of bookkeeping and sales and marketing and stuff, as I say, we've got mentors, expert mentors, who people are throwing themselves at this project down in Luton at the moment. Chamber of Commerce have got 15 people who want to mentor for free, just cover their expenses. You know, so where we do have skill deficits, we fill it with the mentors.
That's great, Glenn. Testament to just how much profile you've raised through this OW, as well as the great work you're doing, I think. I'm thinking maybe it's time for a break and a cup of tea. Can I suggest that we meet back here at 11:30? So that's in about 15 minutes' time. And we'll have Rachel, who's going to pitch to us about her veggie box scheme. And so everyone, off you go, cup of tea, warm up your hands, stroke the dog. See you back here at 12:30.
Cup of just changed tea, I hope.
Susan, I'm sorry, I didn't let you have a chance to ask your question. Do you want to throw it in or write it in the chat box and we'll come back to it? Sorry.
I'm still here if you want to ask it, Susan.
Perhaps we've covered it anyway. Well, thanks very much, Glenn. We'll see you back here in a few minutes, and we'll have Rachel. Right, welcome back everyone. It's Vicky here. I think we're all here. No one says they're away. So what I think we'll do is ask Rachel to make her pitch around her balanced scorecard, and then give us the chance to ask some questions, make some comments, which I hope Rachel will find useful for the future. Hugh, before we start, is there anything that you wanted to say?
Just to apologise to Rachel, I see, looking back through my emails, that you asked me to feed in before this session, and I haven't managed to do that. Rachel, don't be don't be put off. It's a very interesting pitch. Go for it. I'll come back during the discussion.
Right, thanks, Hugh. I'll just tell you a little bit about where I work. I work for a project called Red to Greenhouse. It's under the wings of the registered charity Red to Green. The original name was Turning the Red Lights Green. So it's all about, rather than there being a stop sign, there being a go sign. So that's where the name comes from. Red to Green is also a limited company. And Red to Greenhouse, where I work as the manager, is a social enterprise that they set up about 10 years ago now. We offer work, learning and social experiences to adults with learning disabilities and long-term health problems. We currently have 22 adults with learning disabilities who attend the project from 1 to 3 days a week, and that gives us a total of 41 service user sessions a week. We have a large industrial-sized greenhouse, which was donated to us by Wren, where we grow our bedding plants. We have a small farm shop where we sell veg, fruit, bedding and perennial plants. We're looking to increase the number of learners we have to full capacity of around 60 service user sessions a day, to reopen on Mondays. We were open on Mondays and we had to close because we had a reduction in the number of learners due to some changes in funding. The service users now pay a fee to attend using their personal budgets. Up until last year it was free to attend. The funding, we're subsidised by the local FE college who provide funding to run our training sessions in horticulture. We're limited to no more than service users a day on our site, and any plans to expand this would mean moving to a new area. At present we pay a peppercorn rent to the school, which is ideal in many ways but has its limitations. We're quite far from the main road, which makes it hard attracting customers, which is why we're looking to go to our customers instead of getting them to come to us. We've got an agreement with the local National Trust down the road to sell some of our bedding plants in their shop. We are restricted in how many plants we can sell because of the size of our greenhouse, which is already full at capacity. We have a small veg delivery round on Wednesdays to an elderly people's residential care home and our head office, but we use our minibus, which isn't ideal. We're planning on extending our sales of locally sourced fruit and veg in the form of veg boxes. I am looking for an investment for £5,000 for a delivery van. Many of our learners have gained huge benefits since they have been attending Red to Greenhouse. We use soul records to measure soft outcomes, including increased confidence and self-esteem, and we are seeing more tangible benefits as well. One of our learners, who is in his 40s, is starting his first ever job this month with the Co-op supermarket. He's gained his skills through serving customers in our farm shop, and he's really, really excited to start working his new job. We have one learner who, as far as we knew, was non-verbal, and he's started to speak now, and English isn't his first language, but he's started to say some words. In addition to working with vulnerable adults who have been socially excluded in the past, we also aim to reduce the impact on the environment and aim to be as environmentally sustainable as possible. We sell locally sourced fruit and veg, including homegrown produce. All our veg is sourced from farmers within the county, and therefore the carbon miles are very low. We would like to look at the possibility of running the van on biodiesel in the future. I have a chart of the profits we currently make selling veg in our shops. I don't know if Vicky's able to put that up. We're currently averaging profits of about £160 a month. There are no additional labour costs to running the shop. It's open all the time, and staff and learners during activities will answer any customers that call. We have a little bell that rings, and we leave an honesty box out when we're out and about in the community, which works well. We also have a little shop in the school, and it's mainly people who attend the evening classes that use that. And again, there's an honesty box screwed to the wall because we found out people aren't always so honest, and the honesty box got taken a couple of times, but now it's we seem to be making quite a little bit from the school shop. taking into account the cost of a second-hand van for 5 years, the publicity cost for the surrounding villages, the insurance and maintenance costs attached to the van, the monthly cost would be £220. Selling each veg box for £10 with a profit of £5, we'd need to sell 44 a month or 11 a week to break even. The population of the local villages is just over 11,000. The greengrocers in the village where we're based, Bottisham, was closed down last year and has been replaced by a kebab shop. The nearest vegetable shop is actually over the dual carriageway. It's quite a fair distance, and that's Tesco's. There are other veg delivery companies, but we believe our selling point is that we are a charity supporting adults with learning disabilities in the community, and the fact that all our veg is locally sourced, reducing people's carbon footprint. We already have strong links with the community and people know and trust who we are. We currently deliver veg to the residential home for the elderly on their Wednesday coffee morning. Just looking at the balanced scorecard, we have a turnover of 115k, that was last financial year. Around 60k comes from funding from the FE College for delivering the training, but that's only going to reduce in future years. About 15k is from direct payments from learners, and it's this that we're looking to increase, and somebody has been appointed as a development role within the charity and is looking at marketing ourselves and attracting more learners. 20k is for running the minibus. We've recently got a new minibus actually, and the contract is from the county council, and we receive 10k in grant payments and 13k from selling our plants and vegetables. Any questions at all?
Obviously I'll come in, but in the spirit of friendly interrogation, I'd like to encourage other people to provide a critique to Rachel on the presentation, on the business model, on the strategic plan, so the themes that we've been covering. Could I see some hands up from other people? Go for it, Paul.
I thought that was an excellent presentation. I kind of understand all aspects of what you're trying to do, particularly the social benefit, and I think the inclusion of very short but very clear anecdotes was really made a very powerful case.
Hi, it's Temi. Yes, Rachel, I thought that was a really good pitch. The human side of the stories that you told were very compelling, and I think that would make it a very convincing investment for anyone. My only question was that you mentioned that you needed to sell 44 boxes a month, which isn't very much, and that you said there's a 11,000 people strong area that you're looking at, but do you actually know if people would buy them, if it is being sold and if it's successful already?
Yeah, really good question. We have, the problem is at the moment we have quite a few customers who we ring up the day before, and this kind of tradition started before I arrived on the scene, but basically we've got staff who have really strong contacts in the communities, and they ring up in the main quite elderly ladies who can't get out and about, and they ring up and get their orders. They're very individual orders, like how many potatoes, what size bananas. It's quite a long process, and they ring about 4 or 5 customers, and I'm sure it takes over half an hour to an hour, and then they go and make up the orders and price them ready for delivery the next day. So I think my problem was that I think the need is there, but I think the way we were doing it wasn't very efficient, and we weren't charging anything either for the delivery. So it's really just about starting to streamline what we already do, because we wouldn't be able to take on 40 orders a week with that system. And I think I'm confident there's people out there who would like to get involved. We have the other things. We have an open day and an open weekend, one in spring and one in autumn, where we advertise in all the local village magazines, and we get really good turnout there. And that's to sell, the bulk of our bedding plants, but people also come to buy veg. And it's amazing how many people live in the village and pass by us and don't actually know we're there. And we've put a new sign out, and because we're so far off the beaten track, we're right around the back of the school playing field, that I'm not sure that people are aware we're there. So it's really, getting to them rather than them coming to us.
There, Rachel. It's good to speak to you again. Thinking outside the box a bit, we work with our local veg box scheme in Northampton, and they deliver their veg box by cycles. Now, given they've got a 5-mile radius, working in partnership with them, some of the organisations that we work with have become like outreach centres. So people actually collect their delivery box from a school, from the children's nursery. So that cuts down so much of your work, and we're looking at extending that. I'm wondering if that would be any use to you.
Yeah, that sounds interesting. I'd like the details about that.
It's just a way of working smarter, really, because there's so little profit in VegBox if you're not careful. You have to virtually work the system, and if you can deliver 10 boxes on a Thursday morning at a set place, it just makes it so much easier for yourselves and your resources.
Yeah, and I was watching one of the videos, I think, on one of the websites about Stroudco, and that looked really interesting, where people come and pick up the veg and it comes in. Yeah, I'm sure that there's ways of doing this. I've forgotten my point now. I was going to say something. Oh yeah, we also there's a local organic bakery, Cobb's Bakery, and we have a delivery from them once a week. So it would include organic bread as well in the orders.
Sorry, Susan, I cut you off then. I wasn't sure if you were trying to put your hand down or pick up the microphone again. If you did want to pick up the mic, just grab it now.
I was just going to put my hand down. You're fine.
Hi, Rachel. It's Glenn here. Yeah, great stuff. Brilliant. Sounds brilliant. And we could learn a lot from you, because we're just about to kickstart our urban farm down there. But I just wanted to share one quick thing with you in terms of getting out to people. Was when we were doing some of the market stuff on Marsh Farm, looking at our farm project in particular, we found it quite stimulating and interesting to go and to make a measure of how much potatoes we eat as an estate. And I haven't got the exact figures to hand. I will be able to get them and send them to you. But the point being that it was really interesting to get people to guess. Yeah, and it generated a load of interest on the estate in terms of asking people, how many, when you measure how many bags of potato people buy in a month on average, and then multiply that across the estate. And we, like you, we're 10,000, just over 10,000 people, and you're getting into the hundreds of tons of potatoes every year, and then you can look at how much land we'd need here to yield that much and all of that. And it was just an interesting community engagement thing to get people. We had a little competition about guessing our GDP. People were miles away from it, and also down to the fruit and veg, guessing how much tons of potatoes we eat as an 10,500 people every year. It was a little experience we had that I thought I'd share with you.
Thanks, Glenn. That's really interesting.
Hi Rachel, it's Rick here. Just to say, love the pitch. Couple of questions, points to make. We do, or a company called South Warwickshire Local Food CIC, which is based in Leamington, does something very similar. We funded it this year, and they do about 120 bags across Warwick and Leamington per week, and they charge £3.50, and they make 50p profit per bag. And what they do is they make it a big community event each week at different community centres. I think we've got about 4 or 5 different community centres where the packing actually takes place, and that becomes quite a nice community event in itself. So that might be something that I don't know, that you might be interested in. And the only other thing that I would say is it takes a lot of space, even just 40 bags a week, because that's how many we do approximately in each centre. That takes up a fair amount of space when it's all delivered in crates, and then you've got to repack it all into bags or boxes. So as long as you've got some scope for that. But I would say have a look at South Warwickshire Local Food CIC. And we've also got an organic farm in Leamington called Canalside Community Food, and they do about 100 bags of organic food each week. So there might be some things that you can steal from there. I'm involved in both of them, so if you need any advice or anything, just give us a shout.
Thanks, Rick. Yeah, I like the sound of the whole community getting together to pack the bags. Certainly, one of the things is that, as well as making profit, it's an activity that our learners or trainees can take part in. We have a classroom that's attached to the shop. The shop is relatively new. It used to be just a lean-to, but we've actually got a physical building on the end of the classroom now. It's quite a big classroom, and I can envisage, that it can be a morning activity with everybody setting out the vegetables, and we do a lot of activities through just vegetable recognition and kind of embedding literacy and numeracy into all the activities we do. So, counting tomatoes and reading labels and weighing out vegetables is all part of this kind of training that we offer.
Nice picture. I was just it's following on really, I think the same point someone else has made. I was in a centre in Bristol a few years ago called Southville, which I think is a development trust. And it's one of our benchmark centres. I was really impressed when I went there. And one of the things they did was, it's an urban area, so it's slightly different, but they had a whole pile of boxes piled up in the centre, and people went in on a certain day of the week and collected their box, sat in the cafe, had a natter. It was kind of like an after-school pickup, big social event, and it was, it's not always necessary, I guess, to take stuff to people. People might actually enjoy the process of coming to collect their box. But also the other thing I think Southville were doing, but something we certainly are wanting to do in Shipley, in part to counter the great Asda financial vacuum cleaner we've got in our town centre, is to provide groceries in a box scheme. And we have a wholesaler called Sumo in West Yorkshire, and we're talking to them about doing a kind of dry food and grocery box scheme as well.
Hi, I haven't got a question, just can't get rid of my hands up. Thank you.
Rachel, I'll try and sort of round up and make a few comments then. I think it's a great pitch, but I think you've made a classic mistake in the sense that you focused on the vegetable selling part of the business, whereas actually I see you as a social care provision business, where most of the value comes from providing these meaningful occupations. And I agree that the individual stories that you told were absolutely spot on. But ultimately, the viability of your business depends on your ability to attract these vulnerable adults with their personalized budgets to insufficient numbers for you then to run the whole operation. So I don't know if I used the example of chopsticks in North Yorkshire in our initial meeting, but it seems to me that you're the same model as them. That is that the vegetable selling thing is obviously part of the therapeutic and learning experience for your clients, but actually financially is not the significant part of your business. So in that sense, I would have liked to hear much more about your understanding of the rollout of the personalization agenda, the strength of your contract with the local, with the FE college, and the ability to develop your numbers on that side rather than your numbers on the vegetable side. I gather that the farm shop and plant nursery is just a project within a larger charity. It seemed to me, if we're going to the top of the presentation, which is always about establishing your credibility to start with, I would have liked to hear more about the overall Red to Green charity and the support that provides to this particular project. And I think this is something I've said before. You need to establish your own personal credibility. I think us English are bad at this. We need to learn from the Americans. I think I've said this before. But you need to introduce yourself and your experience and the experience of your team. And that experience, you did talk when you were talking about the going through the balanced scorecard, about hiring a new member of staff who had some specific skills around adults with learning disabilities. Those surely are the key skills, because that is the key part of the business. So your credibility in that direction seemed to me important. The value of this business is again around the cost of doing nothing with these adults who otherwise may be a cost to the state. Particularly, I would have thought then, thinking through which parts of the state are these people potentially going to be costs if nothing positive is done with them. And I would like to hear more about relationships with the PCT, the health services, social services, in terms of broadening that relationship for that key part of the business. So those, I guess, are my general comments. And I guess in terms of proving that, you used this, and you did give a little bit of explanation, but you used a piece of jargon around soul records, which I didn't understand. So in that sense, if that is your social measurement, how can you do an SORI around that and show savings to the health service or social services through the work that you do? That seemed to me to be important as part of the business model going forward. Your green credentials are great, but to some extent fill the sort of warm and fluffy part of the presentation, it seemed to me. I think other people made the comment about how much benchmarking had you done. I think that it's relevant to produce that as part of your pitch. Here's something we've been doing for a while. We're part of a larger charity group. Here's our market focus. We have been to visit 1, 2, 3, 4 other organizations who are working in this field and have learned from them. So yeah, Acumen, I think of Holt Hill, who are working in Lincolnshire with a similar client group, Chopsticks in Yorkshire. Various people have talked about other vegetable delivery schemes from which you learn. So all of those I think could have been included. Just 2, 3 final thoughts from me. Interesting to hear that the greengrocers was closed in the village. I wonder if there isn't an empty shop in the village that you could take over as perhaps a second stage or a further aspiration. There are a number of greengrocers who've reopened. I think of one in Slathwaite in the Colne Valley in Yorkshire, who've just done a community share issue to save the last fresh greengrocers in their village. Is there an empty shop that finally you might have aspirations for? And then something about, I was intrigued that the way that you're working at the moment was actually phoning individual people who you know and asking them and giving them an element of choice. And that seemed to me a very interesting personalized service. I know you said it wasn't working particularly efficiently for you and that you wanted somehow to generate longer term secure orders. But it does seem to me that if your client group is mainly elderly people, maybe that personalized service is actually key to it, and rather than something that you should bin, is actually something that you should build on. I was intrigued to hear that you're also delivering bread. I wonder if you've got this trust relationship with a client group in terms of customers who are buying your product, whether there isn't something else that you can add. You know, could you also do a major shop at Tesco's for people if they don't have transport and deliver that alongside? Or whether there are other, you know, softer services that you could deliver in terms of while you're there, can you do installing, I don't know, long life light bulbs? Can you offer welfare benefits rights assistance and that kind of thing? It's a bit linked to the thinking around Kivo eBiz, and you remember that model where it was actually based on a trust relationship, and what could you cross-sell? Could you get the PCT, for instance, to pay you to deliver health information to the elderly client group who you seem to be serving? As ever from me, that's, you know, quite a lot of things that sound as if they're critical. Let me go back to the top. I thought it was a brilliant, clear pitch. It was very clear what you wanted. Sorry, one other thing's popped into my head. Whenever people talk about buying a van, I always wonder about whether you've explored the leasing option as well as the buying option. Obviously, that spreads the upfront capital cost over the time that you use it, and actually, to some extent, farms out some of the maintenance issues around keeping a van on the road. So again, fantastic presentation. I hope that my thoughts have been taken in the spirit they're intended. I'll sign off and let you come back on some of those things. So I see Paul's got an additional comment, so maybe we'll take that first.
Comments really. One is I'm always listening to radio too much. There was a scheme somewhere or other. Can't remember the program or where it was, but it was people were selling. A butcher's was running out of a pub, and it apparently was just working. Hard to imagine, but working fantastically. And I'm sure that might be a scenario where some of the users would quite enjoy themselves. The other one is this notion of PCT funding. Just to say, my partner works within a PCT on voluntary sector commissioning, and the picture is extremely grim. So it's, I think it's healthy to, in a sense, be doing things other than what Hugh was saying, which is to present this as a business in its own right. I quite like that about the pitch, that you presented it as a going concern, that people would get involved in it because it was a viable business, not just because it was a worthy cause as such. That's my 2 penny.
Hi. Oh, great comment. Thanks, guys. I'm still laughing about the butchers in the pub. My local pub's got 2 micro pigs in the garden. Maybe that's the way they're going. Hugh, just to come back on, you was talking about, you know, the chopstick thing and where the actual money is coming from, and you're totally right. I mean, although I was pitching for this veg box scheme, our number one priority is our learners and increasing our numbers of learners. As I said, we've only got 41 service user sessions a week with a capacity of 60, and we vitally need to fill those 19 places. But that, I mean, that in a way is already being taken care of. We've got funding, and there's a new post, and it's her key role to go around. There's more than one project. We've got other projects in the charity, and it's about recruiting and marketing ourselves now as a brand. We had years of having a waiting list, and now we've had to introduce charges, and people are paying out their personal budgets. It means that they can shop around and spend their personal budget on where they want to be, and we've got to make ourselves as attractive as possible to more learners coming in. What were your other points? Yeah, personal credibility and the skills of the team. That was a really good point. The cost of doing nothing. We haven't used any social impact tool. The Soul Record is good at showing softer outcomes, not just being accredited in horticulture, but what the learners gain from it. But I would be really interested in to look at some of these SROI tools and look at the cost in quantitative terms of what we're providing. The greengrocer's closing. Yeah, it's a kebab shop now, unfortunately, but that would be ideal to open a shop in village. And the leasing options for van, that's something I haven't looked at, but certainly I will do now. So thank you for your comments. It's been really useful.
Thanks, Rachel. It's a hard thing to do to kind of just stand up electronically, as it were, in front of everyone. I hope you found it useful to have some comments. So, just to give people a quick roundup, our next session is on Friday the 3rd of December. I'm really sorry, Marie, I've not been able to change the time, so we're meeting at 1. All I can suggest is maybe you can listen to the recording of the session, which I will circulate afterwards. The visit of Wolverhampton is on the 13th of December, so we can either meet at the workspace for 11 o'clock in the morning, which is very close to Wolverhampton's town centre, or what I'm suggesting is if people are coming on the train, if they'd like to meet at Wolverhampton station at 10:30, we'll get a series of cabs together. I think the 13th is a Monday. Let me just check in my diary. It is a Monday. If you go onto the community sector trading website, the Marsh Farm assignment is now live. So you can have a look at the video and the balanced scorecard and an article about the organisation workshop, and just send me some of your thoughts. For those of you who haven't managed to do some of the assignments, do take some time. We'll take you about sort of 10 or 15 minutes each one, and a really, really useful way, I think, to just consolidate some of the thoughts, some of the learning, some of the things that we've been talking about. So next week, the session is at 1 o'clock. In fact, should we do a quick hands up around the room? Would people prefer 1 or 1:30? So hands up for 1 o'clock. Hands up now for 1:30. Or many more people for 1:30. So I hope that that will be acceptable. I'm going to say 1:30, and we'll go through till about 3:30 or 4. So shall we do a quick hands up round the room just to say how you felt today's session went? One key point you've taken from either of the 2 participants. Hands up, everyone. David, just waiting for you. Fantastic. Over to you then, Paul.
On Glenn's, I was actually just bowled over by it. Both presentations were brilliant. I've worked out that Glen is 3 hours and 9 minutes away, 174 miles, so I'm planning my trip.
Oh, yeah. Did I put, yeah. I was very nerve-wracking doing my pitch, but I'm glad I did it, and thank you for all the feedback. And Glenn, a really interesting presentation, and I also would love to visit.
I think they were both brilliant, but the one with the veg box I think might come in quite handy for me might be able to use it in sort of joint with my time bank allotment.
Hi all, again great session with lots of information and advice to take away, and I look forward to the next session. Thank you.
Just a quick thanks to everybody, especially to Glenn and Rachel. I know how difficult it is to stand up there and talk. Yeah, I'm very inspired by what Glenn's doing. It's very different and unusual, especially his recruitment methods. I love that. I'm just so intrigued. So see you all again soon. Thanks a lot.
Vicky here. Yeah, fantastic. I love Glenn's project. I think it's massively inspirational, and I'm really hoping that come Monday he's going to go full steam ahead.
Hi, yeah, I just have to agree with everyone. I thought Glenn's project was really interesting, and you know, if I had to look at the timeline, I'm sure it'd be really fascinating. I think something in there for everyone to pick up on. And yeah, well done, Rachel. I thought that was a really good presentation, and I think Hugh's comments show how sensitive and delicate doing a pitch is. So yeah, that was a really good learning experience. So thanks for sharing.
Again, reiterating what everyone else has done, well done to you both for getting out there and doing the job. Well done to you both.
Hi everyone, yeah, another great session. Thanks a lot, Vicky, for moderating, etc. Great presentations from both Glenn and Rachel, and I'd love to come and see the Marsh Farm project. So if anyone does sort of plan to go and visit, let me know, because I'm only around the corner. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to make the Wolverhampton visit because I've got a training programme on that day that I've got to deliver. So yeah, it'd be lovely to meet up with everybody at a different time, maybe at Marsh Farm. Would be great. No, thanks.
Yeah, thanks everyone. I really enjoyed this morning. I think the Glen project at Marsh Farm obviously is, you know, really interesting. It does have resonance with other enterprise development models as far as I'm concerned. For me, although it all sounds a bit risky, the cost of doing nothing is so huge in the poor communities. It seems to me the risks are modest in relation to the potential outcomes. And Rachel, well done again for your presentation. I mean, I don't think that there's any easy way around learning how to pitch, and I'm sure that practice is part of it. So well done for being brave enough to pick up the baton, and I hope that, you know, next time you do it, sort of thing, it will come easier and be less scary. So great, and speak to you all again Friday the 3rd.